Hey, everybody, welcome to the Ronline Report. Today's guest, very good local guy. He is a professional musician. He's a owner of Foundation Fitness. You've probably seen him as a co-host on the Boston Mass podcast and a lot of videos on the Boston Mass channel, Jose Raymond. And just last weekend, he became a new IFBB Pro League professional by virtue of winning both the overall and the over 35 and the over 40 at the NPC Universe in Charleston. Is it South Carolina? North Carolina?
Yeah, South Carolina.
One of those Carolinas, South Carolina. Please welcome Nate Telow. How are you, Nate?
I'm great, Ron. Thank you for having me on. And I have to start. I've followed you for a long time. When I was at Berklee College of Music, first getting into bodybuilding, following this stuff, I used to go down to the corner nutrition store in Northeastern area. I was living like around Berklee College of Music, and get MD the first day it would come out fresh off the press. And I used to follow your daily pump blog when you were competing, everything leading up to whatever show you were doing. So wow, been following you for a long time.
Wow. Berklee, and that's Berklee. That's where they used to have the New England contest for many years.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. The BPC Center.
And it was actually a terrible venue for bodybuilding shows because it was designed for good acoustics and musical performances. Real steep. It was kind of narrow, but man, it was still a cool place. I kind of miss it compared to where we've been at last year. So Nate, tell me about your early, I know you weren't the typical, meathead starting out at 13, 14, getting picked on and lifting weights. What was your childhood like and early life? What were your main interests back then?
Yeah. So I grew up in Lewiston, Maine, now home of Chris Aceto, oddly enough. Grew up in Lewiston, played all the sports people play, baseball. The first one I really took a passion to was martial arts, like Kempo karate. So I did that for 5 or 6 years at a young age. And around 11 is when I got into guitar and was doing martial arts and guitar around the same time. And then just guitar overtook everything. And I stopped like all sports. I was the guy in high school being like, can I get credit for this or that so I don't have to play on the sports team? I want to go home and play guitar. So I was just obsessed with guitar, grew my hair out down to my chest, had the leather jacket, listened to Metallica.
Oh, man.
And so, yeah, sports as a kid, really into martial arts, and then nothing but guitar.
We have a lot of rock fans out there. I want to know, was it a band or a guitarist? Did somebody inspire you like Eddie Van Halen or Jimmy Page? You heard them and said, oh my God, I want to learn to play the guitar like that guy.
All of the above. So I grew up with my dad listening to classic rock radio. So that was music for me, was just the Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, and all Beatles stuff. Like my dad loved the Beatles. So it's just all of that. And that's so guitar driven. Everything about all of that music is guitar. And then probably around that era when I was 11, it was like Def Leppard was big on the scene. Pour Some Sugar on Me with that intro on guitar. All the Guns N' Roses stuff, right? The Appetite for Destruction is like some of the greatest guitar of all time. Pearl Jam was coming out. That first album was all guitar. So that was Guns N' Roses was a big one, Pearl Jam. And then, I got into like Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, and then it's kind of went down the blues route, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Then you're like, who did he listen to? B.B. King, Albert King. And I got super, super into blues by the time I was in high school. But early on, like it was rock, some metal, tons of Metallica. And all of that stuff. So heavy rock, classic rock, and then went into blues.
Did you play a lot of, was it slide guitar where they put the little piece of glass?
Yeah, I really never learned that, man. You would think, right? Like being a guitar player and playing blues, but I just never picked it up. I could probably figure it out, but the guys that do it, there's, Allman Brothers are masters at slide. Derek Trucks, who's from that lineage of Allman Brothers, they're so good that I'm sort of like, if I can't do it like that, I don't want to do it. It's like a hack slide player. So I never really got into it, although I should someday.
Now, did you get into, most guys like you who start playing guitar that early, by the time they're in high school, they're in bands. Were you in a few bands back then?
Yeah. So a lot of I was in bands with high school kids. Everybody sucks. And I was a really good guitar player really quickly. So what I used to do was, like the only city in Maine that you're going to have a nightlife is Portland. So my dad would pick me up or my mom and dad would take turns driving me to Portland, they would have these like Monday night blues jams at these smoky blues. This was like before smoking was outlawed. Everybody's smoking in the bars. And I'm like 15 years old playing in these bars with like 40, 50-year-old musicians.
Awesome.
But they would put me up with, they saw me as like the kid that, was trying and up and coming. So they'd put me up with really good musicians, and I'd get my ass kicked every week, and I'd have my little tape recorder there, and I'd go back and listen to it and practice all week and try and be better the next week and go up, get my ass kicked again. So that was a lot. I played in a couple bands, but the high school kids, it was a novelty, and I wanted to be with the serious guys. So a lot of it was these blues jams that I would go to. One of my main guitar teachers when I was first starting out had a great classic rock band. He would let me sit in, whenever possible. My mom was always the one that's like, my son's not playing in a bar at 15 years old. And my dad would kind of fight for me and be like, I'll take him. You don't have to go. So I would sit in with a lot of like older musicians. They'd invite me to come in and, play with their classic rock band for the night at like 15, 16.
So, most musicians that I know of don't necessarily go to college and get a degree in it. So what's the goal with that? I mean, were you thinking, what was the goal? Because if you're going to be a professional musician, do you go to college for it, or do you just go all around and study on your own, or do you be
Yeah, I think for me, most of the musicians that have made it certainly didn't go to college. There's a running joke with Berklee that if you graduated, you're not going to make it, because anyone that's famous that went to Berklee went for like a semester or two and dropped out and then went on to make it. So
I need to know, but now who are some of the famous Berklee dropouts?
John Mayer is a big one.
Oh, wow.
I believe Dixie Chicks.
Wow.
There's a whole bunch of others. There's a ton of people that Berklee takes credit for, and they were there for a semester, but they got the "we made them" stamp on it.
That's awesome.
So I think a lot of it was just, at that age of 18 being like, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to do this. And I have to go to college. My parents are saying, you got to go somewhere. And like, do I go to school for psychology? Do I go to school for computers to like just have a job? And actually my first major at Berklee was music therapy, thinking that would actually lead to a job, that I would get out, be a music therapist during the day. You work with like, could be Alzheimer's patients, people with PTSD coming back from war, all these different things, using music as a tool of therapy. So that was my initial thinking, was this degree will lead to a job at least. And as I got into it, I was like, man, I just want to play with bands. I want to gig. My heart's not in this other thing. And you can't do that working with those types of people that require so much of you if you're not passionate. So I switched my major to guitar performance. My hope going into that, or my initial dream, was not to be famous myself, but to be the sideman to like all the bands that are out there. When, whoever it is, a Miley Cyrus, Ariana Grande, whoever, every time they go on tour, they put a band together of random sidemen musicians. This guy on guitar, this guy on drums, and they go on tour for 3-4 months. Those guys get a break for a month, and you find another band to tour with. And so at the time, that's what I wanted to do. And, then you get out and you meet people that actually do it. And you're like, it kind of sucks after a while. Like, you're living in tour buses, you have no home, and right around that time, while I was at Berklee, I started getting into fitness and bodybuilding and working out and the routine of stuff. And I started thinking, I was like, man, how am I going to be able to work out on a tour bus?
Back up. How did something must have struck you, some image, something you saw or read, or what made you even want it? Had that been something that you had been in your thoughts earlier in life, or how did that enter? Because musicians and bodybuilders, very, very different lifestyles, often very different personalities. I don't run into a lot of people in bodybuilding that have done what you did at your level. So how did that transition happen?
Yeah, so much so, like, Berklee didn't even have a gym. It like wasn't even a thing. It's a big school, no gym, no sports, no anything. Nobody works out. Maybe the singers, like maybe, the hot female singer that needs to be in shape for the part. Any other musician is like, I can be fat, I can hide behind my drums, it doesn't matter. So I think it was two things. So when I came into Berklee, I weighed 136 pounds.
Yeah,
that was my weight, like 5'8", 136. And this was my first time away from home. So I didn't have like mom making me a good dinner and the meals made. So my breakfast was like Pop-Tarts. My lunch was like a slice of pizza from Little Steve's, you know, right around Berklee.
Yeah.
And dinner was like a meatball sub or some Twix candy bars.
Yeah.
And getting through the semester, I just remember being like, I feel like shit. I'm taking naps. Like I'm 18. I feel like garbage. And I remembered being a kid and playing sports and having energy. And I was like, I got to do something. And probably around that time, you know, being 18 in, you know, on my own, it was like, you know, being a musician, you tend to be at least like not a singer, but a backup musician, guitar player. You tend to be very introverted. You know, I would spend 6 hours a day sitting down practicing guitar. So there becomes a part of like wanting to appeal to the opposite sex, you know, and be attractive, and you don't know how to do it. And you're like,
wait a minute, you're a guitar player, isn't
yeah,
that?
I know, right? And then you fast forward all the way to where we are now with all these muscles, and it doesn't get the chicks at all. So I was wrong back then.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, we all are. So, you know, where did you get your information? Where did you start training?
So I think my first gym membership was the old Golds on Lansdowne Street.
Yeah, right across from Fenway Park.
Yeah, yep. And I had no idea what I was doing. I bought the Arnold Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. So you have that back there.
Yeah.
I bought that. I looked through. I was on the forums, whatever they were back in the day.
Muscle Mayhem was a big one.
That was probably one of them. Yeah. So I was on the forums. I had that book. I bought every issue of Flex and Muscular Development. And so probably the routines you were writing is what I was doing back then, you know, okay. Ronnie Coleman's back routine. And so I didn't know what I was doing. A big turning point for me then, right out of college, a guy that I had met said, you need to meet this local guy who trains bodybuilders. And I said, okay, took me to him. The guy's name was Ralph Mercadante. I don't know if you know him. So he used to own Universe Gym.
Okay, I've heard of that.
It was like a small chain of gyms around the city. Yep. And so I met Ralph, and Ralph's the guy that taught me like the mind muscle connection. He's like the Charles Glass of the East Coast. And immediately was like, you're using too much weight on everything. You know, let's incline bench press. The bar in a 25 is all you need. And we're just going to squeeze it out. And so he really taught me that mind muscle connection. He used to have this gym in Somerville called Above the Rest, and little hole in the wall spot, the signed pictures of bodybuilders all over the wall, the best old school equipment that he had saved for the last 20 years. Wow. And so I would go there and train with him. And that was when I really learned how to train. Everything before that was forums, magazines, you know, a mishmash of stuff. But with Ralph, it was this is how you connect. This is how you hit every area of your back. You know, the weight didn't matter. It's about contracting the muscle. And so that kind of set me on that path of learning how to lift at that point.
And is that when you started getting results? Up to that point, were you getting any results, or is this when you really started to grow finally?
So I probably went from like 136 to probably 170 on my own.
Oh, okay.
You know, not like super jacked bodybuilder, but I was certainly the jacked guy of Berklee. I became like the bodybuilder of Berklee at, you know, 170 pounds because I was the only person with any muscles. And yeah, I started working with Ralph and probably got up to about 200 pounds, cleaned up the diet. And I don't even know if you know this, I competed back in 2005 and 2006. Ralph got me ready for my first show. I did New England's in 2005.
I did that. Shit. Okay.
Yeah.
What class were you in?
Light heavy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was in the heavies in that year. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured you might have been around that time. And so I had no idea what I was doing. And I was joking with Jose the other day because I found my pictures from that show. And Ralph's so old school. He put together my posing routine and he had me doing the victory pose, and like I have no muscle on me, you know, the poses were ridiculous. And so I went into that show so unprepared, you know, as a lot of people do that first show. Yeah. I think that was obviously back in the day when it was only bodybuilding, you know, bodybuilding, fitness, figure.
That was it.
And the classes were deep, you know, there was like, I think like 18, 20 guys in light heavies.
Oh, light heavies are always stacked at that show back in that era. Always.
Yeah. So I got 12th place, and man, I was pissed because I don't do anything to get 12th place. So I went and I knew, so when I trained with Ralph was so old school, he didn't believe in cardio. So we prepped for the show just by pulling calories. And my workouts were garbage. And, the training itself from Ralph was amazing.
Yeah.
The diet was that kind of Arnold era of just do it by training and by pulling food.
Steak and what do you have you on, like tuna and lettuce or something?
Yeah, it was just no carbs. So I knew for myself, I was like, that didn't feel right. And I went and I knew a girl who was a pro fitness competitor, Nikki Rogers, who also had a PhD in nutrition.
Yeah.
And everything was cutting edge, like stuff that we're doing now. She was doing 15 years ago because she had access to all the medical journals. And so I worked with her on nutrition and came back the next year in 2006 and did the Mass New Hampshire States in Derry, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And I won middleweights, both novice and open that year.
Nice.
And then that was kind of a turning point for me where, that was a real prep where I put everything into it and I suffered. And at the end of it, I was like, wow, that was something I didn't think I was capable of. I got in the best shape, but it was a light bulb moment of, if I just applied myself in that way in other areas of my life, what could I do?
Right.
And so I stopped competing and I said, like, let me apply this to my career and try and make some money.
Well, before we completely abandon Berklee and everything, you told me something before we started recording, the pinnacle of your performing career as a student musician was what? This is pretty cool.
Yeah. So the graduation ceremony of Berklee, the year that I graduated, every year they give honorary doctorate degrees. And I lucked out because the year after me, the honorary doctorate degree was Bill Cosby, which didn't age very well. My year was Steven Tyler and a jazz singer, Diane Reeves. Wow. And so what had happened was for the commencement concert, Berklee puts together an all-star band of students. And I got picked to be the guitar player in the band out of like 1,000 guitar players.
Wow.
And so they put this band together to play Aerosmith songs for Steven Tyler and his parents, who were alive at the time, sitting in the front row, performing all their hits for, an hour's worth of music as a tribute to him. And then he'd come up and get the degree. So we did that all night. We see him front row as we're playing this stuff. And he comes up to accept the award. And, it's Steven Tyler. Like, he just turns into this performer. People are chanting. And he turns to us and says, do you guys want to do something? And we're all looking at each other because this was a very structured, well-rehearsed show. Yeah. And so I feel bad. They ended up scrapping a kid who was going to sing Dream On, his one song as a tribute. And we did Dream On with Steven Tyler.
Wow.
So never rehearsed with him. We had our own arrangement with a full orchestra string section, and he came in and sang it. It's up on YouTube.
Wow.
And it's killer, man. It's such a great performance.
I'm gonna find that now.
it's like, I don't think I can do anything musically. I peaked at 22 on guitar at that show.
Basically, you got to be Joe Perry there for a few minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So that's always been the highlight. Growing up listening to classic rock, I mean, that has to be one of the 5 greatest classic rock songs of all time. Like Bohemian Rhapsody, Dream On, whatever. And to play Dream On with Steven Tyler was insane.
I just want to tell this real quick. So I grew up in Waltham, and they had a rehearsal space called The Warehouse, and it was behind next to this place called Mo Blacks. It was by the railroad tracks, and I had a friend who lived down the street from me who was obsessed with the Beatles and Aerosmith, strange duo, but somehow he knew they were there, and he would like randomly walk down there to see if they were rehearsing, and if they were, he'd run up and get me, and we'd run down there. And we'd like sit there with our ears up against the wall and listen to them rehearsing and jamming and stuff. I never got to go inside. Later, when they broke up, Joe Perry used that same place, and Joe let him hang out while he was recording his solo album. But Aerosmith was, to play with Joe Perry as anybody is great, but to be from this area, it's amazing. He's like a rock god in the Boston, New England area. That's our guy. So wow, good for you, dude.
100%. Yeah, it's still to this day, the the Facebook, anniversary pics pop up, so many years ago you did this, or when I posted a picture, and I'm like, man, what a highlight. Like that's going to be like top 5 memories of my life, probably. How do you top that?
This is random, but man, I've said this, you have a great voice, a very professional radio podcaster voice, but you have no accent at all. How did you lose your accent? Because you're from Maine, your accent's up there worse than ours.
I have no clue. I have some words. I get asked here and there if I'm Canadian. So my mom's side of the family came from Quebec. So I don't know what the words are, but it comes out every once in a while where people are like, are you Canadian?
Well, I believe Lewiston, Maine is a lot of French Canadians up there, correct?
Yeah, it's mostly like they used to have the mills, Bates Mill and all these mills. Everybody came down from Canada for the job. So it was like every corner has a giant Catholic cathedral church, every street corner. And very, very French Canadian there.
So, I mean, before we get away from, you still play and everything, but was graduating Berklee, was that the end of your music career, or have you still continued it on the side while you're doing all these fitness related things that you do?
Yeah. So I've kept playing. When I got out, part of me was a little burnt out because I went from loving music, doing it when I wanted to now a curriculum. And so like Berklee has standard classes like conducting and arranging. Like I just wanted to play rock and blues guitar, and I had to learn to arrange for a big band, conduct a classical orchestra, all of these different things, plus play guitar, the stuff I wanted to do, the stuff I had to do for ensembles. And so you get out and you're sort of overloaded. It's like 4 years of not always stuff you want to do. So I still loved music, but I knew I didn't want to get out and like work at Guitar Center or teach guitar lessons. I was like, I need something else to give me a little bit of a breathing room and then play gigs when I want to play them. So that's when I became a personal trainer. I like anyone else, I had put some muscle on, and I was the most knowledgeable guy at Berklee, which isn't saying much, but I was like, I'll be a trainer. That would be really cool to be in a gym. And at that time I was in an original rock band where we were trying to get a record deal, and it was perfect. I was like, I can work here all day. If I got to take a few days off, I just tell my clients I'm out of town. We were gigging in New York constantly, trying to do these record label showcases. Yeah. And I mean, we got to the point where we actually had a deal in front of us to sign, like a development deal. Sign here, we take you off the market, we'll work on you. We had a beautiful female singer, like original rock band. I love the stuff we were doing. And part of the deal was that our female singer needed to take like stripper lessons. Like they wanted to go the route of like, she was trying to be like Paramore. Like we were this like rock band with a female singer, for songwriting, and they wanted to go like Britney Spears. Right. And so we turned it down. The whole band was like, let's try our luck in California. It's a different market. They all moved. I stayed behind. And so I took a little bit of a break from playing. I built up my personal training business, 7-8 clients a day. And then what I did, like, if you're sort of a local musician, the way you make money in this is doing wedding bands, corporate parties. So I joined a wedding band, and every year, every wedding season, it would be every Friday, Saturday, at least every Saturday. Yeah. I'm on Martha's Vineyard. I'm in Nantucket. I'm in, Newport, playing weddings. And so I did that for years and years and years, while having a lot of cover bands that are friends of mine that I would sit in with. Now, fast forward to now, what I do is, now that I'm way more into the bodybuilding thing and trying to be in bed at a reasonable time, not 3 a.m. when you're playing bars, is I pass on. I don't want to be in a band, but I have bands that I really like to play with that I'm like their first call if they need someone to sub. The guitar player can't make it. So it allows me to be a little bit more selective, to play some places around Boston in Faneuil Hall with a cover band and just like go out and have fun when I feel like it, but I don't have the obligation of having to gig routinely. So still play. That's most of it is sitting around the house practicing, playing with some cover bands. I've got a couple gigs coming up in August, one at Plain Ridge Casino, some big festival there with a buddy of mine, his original music. And so I'm way more selective now because most of these gigs don't pay anything. So you're doing it for the love, not for the money.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like bodybuilding, and for most
Yeah, pretty
bodybuilders.
much, yeah. I found two careers that don't pay anything.
Well, that's what they
My
said about
parents
being a
are happy.
writer. I said I'm going to be a writer. They said, good luck being poor. So have fun being poor. So how many, I know you have a sick guitar collection. How many guitars do you own? Do you even know the total?
Ooh, I think I'm like 8 to 10 or something like that. I whittled them down. I had a crazy collection. So yeah, I went nuts. Years ago, I had this corporate job where I was like president of personal training of a huge gym chain. I came in at 4 gyms and we grew to 80 gyms.
I saw that. And you won't say who they were because they probably deserve no credit, no publicity. So that's fine.
So grew the whole thing from 4 gyms to 80 gyms. I had 600 trainers working for me.
Wow.
And it paid really well, because we built this thing up. We were doing like $8 million of personal training a year.
Wow.
So, but I was always on the road. We had gyms in Texas and Chicago and California and Arizona. And so after a while, I got just burnt out of the traveling. So my coping mechanism was to visit the guitar stores while I was there.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, loving Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin, all of these guitars and amps that they used were from the 50s and 60s. An old Les Paul, Marshall stack, like Jimi Hendrix, these old Strats.
Yep.
And so that was always the stuff I wanted when I was at Berklee, but I grew up poor. I was lucky to just have a guitar that worked, and it was never even a thought of these expensive things. So now I could actually afford them. And every check I got, I was like, what guitar can I buy with that? And so I amassed like a stupid collection. It was too much. And I became friends with other collectors, and they started tipping, hey, there's a really good deal over here. You should jump, the addiction group. So I had a whole room full of vintage Fender Strats from the 50s and 60s, old Marshall stacks like Hendrix. And meanwhile, I'm in an apartment in downtown Boston with stacks that were made to play Madison Square Garden, So I became a serious collector. I've whittled it down a lot. Yeah. I still have, behind me is a whole row of
I see that
of amps. I've got a whole bunch of guitars back here. So yeah, I still have quite a collection, probably 8 to 10 guitars, maybe 8 to 10 vintage amps. I'm really into the vintage stuff. That's been my thing.
Do you have any guitars that belong to anybody famous at one point?
Nothing big. Trying to think of a lot of the stuff. The cool thing when you collect vintage stuff is like when you can get the one owner thing. Maybe it's the same for cars or other things.
Yeah.
So I got a really cool piece. I've since sold it. I bought a guitar from a 95-year-old widow in just out of Atlanta. Flew there for the day. There's a guitar maker in New York, D'Angelico, that handmade these things, kind of the Stradivarius of jazz guitars. Handmade these things. There's one in Boston behind glass at the MFA, in the musical instrument thing. So there's like, he made maybe 300 guitars. They're all in collections. This was one that was undiscovered, and a friend of a friend tipped me off. This 95-year-old widow held on to her late husband's stuff, and she was ready to move it.
Wow.
And it was this 1955 guitar that honestly was probably worth like $60,000.
Yeah.
And I got it for 25 grand for this widow. That's what she wanted. I was like, you got it. I bought the amp that went with it. So it was this set that was her late husband. She gave me all these pictures. I spent the day with her. All she wanted to do was go to McDonald's and get a fish fillet. And I heard stories of her husband and how they met. And so a lot of the collecting for me is that the stories, right? So they're a nobody, they're not a big name, but that stuff sticks with you. When you meet the person and you hear about this possession was their favorite possession and it's getting passed on to you. This guy owned this guitar for 45 years or so before he passed away. And then she held on to it. So that's kind of the love for me, is the story, the hunt, the stories of who it came from, what it meant to them. So that's how you get addicted to collecting this stuff.
Yeah. Well, we better get back to bodybuilding before people get really mad at me because I'm asking too many guitar questions. I will ask one last. No particular order. Your favorite 5 guitarists of all time. No particular order.
Okay.
And I'm curious if I know them all, because you might come up with something.
I'll have a couple that you won't know for sure.
Exactly.
So definitely Hendrix. Man, Clapton, Eric Clapton for sure.
Yeah.
probably, if I think back of like real influences and people that I connected with, Stevie Ray Vaughan was a big one in that same style. And then I've got two more recent guys that you probably won't know, and most people won't know. One tours around, and I've actually become friends with him, which has been amazing. Guy's name is Joe Bonamassa. So PBS will show his specials here and there. So he's kind of doing what Clapton did in like modern day blues rock. He'll play down the waterfront in the Seaport area. They've got that outdoor concert venue. He plays there every year.
Oh, wow.
So it's like blues rock, kind of that Clapton thing. So he's one of my favorites, and I've befriended him. So it's badass. I can like text him and be like, check out this new guitar I got, you know. So, and there's one other guy who's very obscure, but I think one of the best guitar players in the world, named Eric Gales. And he's like Hendrix reincarnated. You wouldn't have heard him, but if you ever get a chance,
Eric Gales,
it's like what he's doing isn't human. You know, it's like when the performances, what Hendrix did back in the day was unheard of, right? When he came out, like what he was doing with electric guitar, people were like, what is this? Eric Gales is like that. So wouldn't know who he is, but he's absolutely incredible. And he's another guy that I've been fortunate to become friends with. When I go to his show, he tries to get me up on stage to play with him. He calls me Muscle Man Nate in the concert. So that's kind of my nickname with him.
I mean, I can't think of any other guitar players who are built like you, dude. Yeah, we better get back to bodybuilding. So 2006, New England was where we left off. I'm sorry, Mass and New Hampshire states, and I think it was called the Northeast Tournament of Champions too.
Yeah,
They bundled like 3 shows in that one show. I did it in 2004. Derry, New Hampshire, right? So did you take a break from competing for a while?
Totally. Done. I competed again in 2018.
Oh, wow.
13 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
What brought you back?
This is kind of funny story. So my girlfriend decided she wanted to do a bikini show. And right around that time, I'd left that corporate job where I was traveling. And I was like, I got to get myself more balanced. I was so business, so about making money, that I was like, I want to get back to playing guitar, and I want to get back to working out. I always kind of lifted. I went in and would get a pump, you know, like the average guy. But I was like, man, when I competed, I was a beast in the gym. That feeling that you have of feeling invincible and going in there. And I was like, I wonder if I can get that back. So she, as a Christmas present to me, bought me 3 sessions with Jose.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know Jose. I knew Jose from the ANC supplement store, right? They got his picture. I knew he was like hometown hero bodybuilder.
Yeah.
So she gifted me 3 sessions with Jose. I did those sessions. He kicked my ass. And I was like, wow, I would not do this without him here. This is incredible. Let me keep training with him. So about a month into training, she's now maybe 3 months out from Connecticut Grand Prix. And she's talking to Jose about doing the show. And Jose says, Nate, why don't you jump in? And I was like, no, I haven't competed in 13 years. I completely dismissed it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wouldn't stand a chance. You know, I haven't been training hard for years. And Jose says like, no, jump in and do it. And I was like, I don't want to do it and not do well. Like that'll crush me. You know, I have as my last contest I won. Like, let me go out on that high note, you know, from 2006. So Jose, I didn't know him that well. I thought he was just kind of buttering me up and being positive. You know, you can do anything.
Hold on, Nate, did you not know what you look like? I mean, because I hate to, some people get mad when I say you're a genetic freak, because like, oh, I know you work hard. Everybody works hard. But you have such a structure and a shape to you. Even back then, it must have been apparent to Jose. He must have seen it in you.
He probably did. And I think he did. I didn't at all. I didn't look anything like I look now. And so I wouldn't have seen it. And so Jose basically said, do the show, I'll coach you and you'll win. And like, it wasn't just do it, you know, and you won't embarrass yourself. It was, you'll win. And I was like, what? And he's like, trust me. So I did Connecticut Grand Prix with the girlfriend, and I won classic physique. I was able to make the weight back then. It was lighter. Oh. And I took second in light heavies to like one of Chris Tuttle's guys who was amazing, like needed to requalify for nationals, you know, one of those guys that jumps in to just requalify.
Right.
And that kind of was like, oh shit, like maybe I could do this. And meanwhile, my girlfriend, first show ever, wins novice overall, wins open overall against a stacked bikini lineup, like crushes the show, wins the overall. And so we both left there on kind of a high, like, oh shit, like maybe we can do this.
Yeah.
And the next show was the Cutler. That was my second show with Jose, which I believe you were there.
Yeah.
And I won light heavies, won masters, and we had a battle in that overall. I took second, right? It was Eric who won the thing, the heavyweight, won the overall at the Cutler that year. And so close second, but again, it was like, oh man, maybe I got something here. You know, I didn't believe it at that point. It was Jose saying, no, you're good, you can do this, you know, and I was always a little behind him of, I don't know, you know, I don't know if I can win a show. I don't know if I can get to that level.
It's hilarious because there's so many people out there who are delusional about their physiques and they think they're much better than they are. And they think, oh, I don't have, you know, they go into these shows thinking they're going to wipe the floor with everybody. And then you have guys, I've met so many guys over the years like yourself who actually have the potential to be really good and they just don't see it. I don't know why they don't see it, but you know, eventually if they get a good coach who can sort of keep them motivated and keep them in the game long enough, they do. It blossoms. The talent that was there, it comes to light. Like, you know, when I saw you I thought you won the overall at that. I'm surprised you didn't win that overall. But I remember being there and thinking, damn, this guy gets a little bit bigger, it's over. Because you had that shape. You know, you have that, you can't change the shape. You can't change your bone structure. You can't change your shape. So if somebody has that and all they need is a little more size, a little more condition, it's a done deal. They just have to keep going. And you kept going. So did you keep going consistently or was there another gap after that?
No, I kept going. It like the Cutler thing, each show I got a little bit more belief in myself. And the Cutler was a big one because it's a big show. You know, I understand the tradition of that in New England's as the Boston shows. And it was a really good class. Like even, you know, the overall that show, obviously Eric took it, who looked awesome, the heavyweight. Matt Puglia was the super in that show. The middleweight was great. Even in the light heavies, we had a lot of good guys. So that was like, oh shit, I beat some really good guys. I didn't see it, but I sort of absorbed it of like, you know, maybe there's something. So after that, I did a couple international shows. The girlfriend and I sort of said like, wow, these things suck. Like, let's pick one of these shows and we can make a vacation after it. So we did Costa Rica. It's Alex Cameronero and Maggie's show.
Latin American Championship.
Yeah, yep.
Wow.
So we were like, why not? You know, we've never been to Costa Rica. We'll make a trip out of it. And the cool perk of that show is the overall winner got a pro card. Yeah. So the stakes kind of raised a little bit. It was like, you know, maybe I can do this, but I had no idea. It was like in those shows, it's international. So you have people coming from all over the world. So did that show. I placed third in light heavies. And that show was a lesson for Jose and I. I had grown at that point. I had been adding a little bit more muscle. So at Cutler, I was probably 195, 196 pounds on stage. And that was where I needed to be at that show. Yeah. By the time we got to Latin American Championships, on the day of weigh-ins, the day before the show, I was waking up at 204 and just not eating and drinking all day to make 198 at night, which, you know, seemed like the smart choice to do, and then carb up after. And I was flat as a pancake. Yep. And my look, as we're learning, is that round, bubbly muscle, you know, like I have to have that. That's my thing. So I took third there. I think my girlfriend took fourth in bikini. And then there was, she came back and did New England's like 2 weeks later, won the overall of New England's, that was a really stacked lineup that year. That one was crazy. And then I did 2 weeks after that, Bermuda.
Right. There was a show in Bermuda.
Yeah, I forget what it was called.
Like the Caribbean Championship.
Yes, that was it. Yep.
Yeah.
And that was another one where the overall winner could get a pro card. So it was this, let me see how I do. We again sucked down the light heavies, and it was this time I flew Jose out there with me. So I was like, all right, we'll see if we can do this. Jose's out there in Bermuda with me. We sucked down to make weight. We just went to town on Pop-Tarts and Rice Krispie treats and you know, crumb cakes and everything we could to just get like 400 grams of carbs in after weigh-ins. Yeah. And it still wasn't enough. You know, I was maybe 199, 200 the next day. And I took second place in the light heavies to a guy that's now pro, Yuman Eaton. He turned pro at the Amateur Olympia. Yeah. So Yuman beat me there. And after that show, Jose and I got together and we're like, no more light heavies. Like we're not going to be able to pull this off, especially as I'm growing. Then I did Masters USA's last December.
Yep.
And that was my first big US national show. And I won the heavyweight class there. And I took a really close second in the overall, and you had to win the overall to get the pro card there. Spoke to the judges after, and they were like, man, it was flip a coin. You know, they were like, they gave me some really good feedback. My posing needed a little bit of work. I couldn't stay on my legs. I'd set them, I'd go up and hit the shot, and I'd lose the legs, you know, dumb stuff. And that was enough to not give it to me. So we went back to work, and then fast forward to Universe last weekend was the most recent show.
Now you said 206 on stage?
At this current show, 206, yes.
See, you prove a really good point that I try to make all the time to people. Don't try to come in at the top. Don't suck down to get into the top of the class below you, because in your case, it was disastrous. You lost so much of what makes your physique good is that bubbly, round, full muscle look that you have. And if you drop, for you to come down, like if you had done that again, not that you were going to, but if you had tried to come in at 198 for that show, you would not have looked anywhere near as good. It sounds stupid to people, like that's only 8 pounds. They don't understand 8 pounds of muscle fullness is a lot. That's a lot. So yeah, tell me about the show, because man, it's crazy enough to just earn your pro card once at a show, but you did it twice. So which one was first? The over 35?
The over 40. So they went backward. They started with, 60, 50, 40.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we had that one, and I came out for that. And that was kind of tell a story, that is, all of this is thanks to Jose. Obviously over the years has been absolutely instrumental. None of this would have happened had I not linked up with Jose 3 years ago. But even in this show, Jose came down, we had an Airbnb together. Every morning I'm waking up. Okay, let me see you pose. We're figuring out exactly what to eat that day, the water to drink. We're tweaking every pose. Let's try it this way, that way, just trying to perfect everything that we can to be as polished as possible. So I went out for the over 40s, and I just wasn't like in it. I came out on stage. You've done these things enough. Everyone backstage is goofing off, talking to each other. Here's what I'm going to get for dinner tonight. I did this show 6 years ago. Everybody's making conversation. Right. And I kind of got sucked into that, just making friends. And it was time to go out, and it's like, oh, okay, go out on stage, that 30-second, little posing routine. And I'm just kind of going through the motions, I'm hitting the poses, but I'm not there to win. And we do the call outs for the 40 and up. And I was splitting center with a guy that, looking at pictures, I'm like, I think I beat this guy, but you never know. It's like a 6-man call out or something, splitting center.
Yeah.
Jose runs backstage and gives me the pep talk. Like, do you want to win this show? You got to believe you can win it. You got to go out there in every pose and show those judges you deserve to win this, and really amped me up. It was like that halftime, like at any given Sunday speech. And I go back out for the 35s, and Jose said somebody literally came up to him and was like, did you go back and give that kid a diazide or something? Like, he's drier, he's popping more, and it was just me going for it. Right. So yeah, the over 35s was real big guys. This show didn't have super heavies, so they combined them. Yeah. And so there were multiple guys there that were 235, 245. And, it's kind of intimidating. Here I am, 206, they're towering over me, they're wider.
Yeah.
But I knew Jose had, for this show, instilled enough confidence in me that I had things that other people wouldn't have, right. For the detail, the polish, the things popping out, someone can be bigger, but it doesn't mean better, as you were saying, so yeah, then it was the over 35. That one I was dead center in the 7-man call out. So that seemed a little bit more definitive at that time.
So, but you ended up winning them both. So yeah. The guy you're worried about obviously beat him anyway.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And then went on to win both overalls after that too. I'd never won an overall before. So that was kind of the more immediate gratification, because it was kind of a joke with Jose. I lost the overall in the Cutler. I lost the overall in USA's. And I'm like, am I just always going to be that guy? So that was the immediate gratification of, I finally won an overall. And then it set in after, it's like, oh shit. And, it's technically 2 pro cards. The thing I'll add to that, I might have told you when I saw you the other day, is we actually were attempting to drop out of the second one, kind of the courtesy of, I just won my pro card. They were very quick, like, 40s awards, go right back around 35s awards, right? So it wasn't like we had a block of time, but we had a feeling I might win both. And we wanted to do the right thing and not just take a pro card that could go to somebody else, but we also didn't want to no-show finals, and piss off Steve Weinberger. It's like, what do you do? So we found Steve and said, hypothetically, if this is how this goes down, we're planning on bowing out. And he said, absolutely not. You go out there and you win both. Like, if someone can't beat you, they're not getting that card. I better see you out there both times. And we're like, all right, if it goes down that way, that's what we'll do.
Yeah, because we were talking at Bayshore Athletic Club in Braintree, Mass, greatest gym, everybody. We were talking the other day about, until a couple of years ago, they would do this practice where if somebody won multiple classes and earned the pro card multiple times in the same night at the same show, they used to just keep giving it to the next person down. So if you had come back out, they still, even if you came out for over 41st, you got your pro card. If you came out for over 35 and won again, they would have given the card to the second place in the overall, I'm guessing. Yeah, because you were the heavyweight and overall winner, right?
Correct. Yes.
So they probably would have given it to the next, in the class, maybe the light heavy or the middleweight or something like that. But I'm glad they changed it this way, because if you're going to be a pro, and I bitch and moan all the time about how many pro cards are given out, because I grew up when pro cards were a pain in the ass back in the old days. Were they? You're right. You need to be, if you're good enough to win, you need to be good enough to beat everybody if you're going to go on to the pros. If you can't even win your class, and that's the criteria for getting your card. Anyway, that's a whole other ball of wax. So winning, that was your first overall, but what goes through your head? It's overwhelming and surreal. A lot of people have told me that now I'm a pro. When did it finally hit you? Did it hit you right away, or did it take like a day or a week for you to like, oh my God, I'm actually a pro now?
Yeah, I don't know that it's hit me yet. I was kind of joking with some friends of, maybe I need to pay the fee to the IFBB to get the card, and like, because at this show, some of these other shows, they give you this card, right? We see online of IFBB Pro, and they didn't do that here. They announce it and you get your trophy. So maybe I need to pay my membership dues and get the card. So yeah, I don't know that that's set in yet. It's a weird feeling because, this was obvious. Anybody that competes, that's the ultimate goal, that, for obviously ultimate goal for anybody is make it to the Olympia or whatever. But
right,
the first big goal that is really hard to accomplish for 99% of people is getting the pro card. So I always had am I going to be able to do this? People around me, I have a lot of friends that are entrepreneurs, business people, my parents that are like, all right, this is your 3rd year. How much longer are you going to do this shit? And I'm like, I'm almost there. I can get it, and, they're kind of saying like, how much longer, how many more years are you going to do this? Like, we know you're close, and so there was a part that was like, can I actually do it? And so when you do it, you're like, oh shit, I did it. But now what? Yeah. That was like, for 3 years, this had consumed me if I'm going to get this thing. So, certainly it'll feel real when I decide to pick a pro show.
That's my next question.
Yeah. So Jose immediately, Jose's been my biggest cheerleader from day one, getting me to compete. He really mentally built me up for this show. I came into this show really believing I was going to win it, which is a first for me. And I say that as like more of a shock to myself, of like, that normally doesn't come out. And I was like, I've done the work. It's going to be hard for someone to beat me. And just having Jose in my corner of, I'm going to have the best tan. I'm going to be on top of my posing. All of that stuff. Mentally, I'm going to be stronger than a lot of these guys that aren't there mentally. So I felt really good. The overalls kind of really boosted me up in a needed way of like, oh shit, like maybe I can do this. Because to be honest, Ron, throughout these 3 years, my goal of getting the card was when I get it, I'm done, right? I'm not going to be competitive as a pro. So I'll get this card. I get to say IFBB Pro, and we move on to some other stuff in life. Was what I told myself on this journey.
Yeah.
And winning the overalls this weekend and the feedback I was getting from people there that I respect, gave me a boost of confidence. Jose's obviously, pulling out the calendar, trying to get me to jump in a show this year. Let's have you jump into Tampa. Let's have you do Dallas or Chicago.
Yeah.
And while I see his point, in that I'm in shape, I think I'm going to aim for something next year. I was 206 on stage. Yeah. My body's still growing. I'm so fresh. Jose tells me, all those years that I didn't compete, I wasn't beating up my body. My hips are fine. My shoulders are fine. Everything's good for a 40-year-old person. And I also didn't hit my limit of growing muscle because I wasn't pushing all those years. So I'm pushing it now, and I'm not at my limit. So I have another 6 pounds I can add to still be within the 212 class. And I know I can put that on in the next year in the right places strategically and be way better. So I think sometime next year, I also have, I was telling someone the other day, if my life was like very status quo, I have my 9-to-5 job, and competing was my only form of excitement, I would probably jump in a pro show now because I don't know what to do with myself after. But I have a business venture I'm starting up very, very soon. We hope to have the lease signed this week. And I have a business partner involved in that, an investor that I also don't want to shortchange them and be like, give them 50% because I decided to jump in the Tampa Pro and not give my all to this business that could be a really good opportunity, So I think I'm going to do a show next year, whether it's like New York Pro, which obviously when you're a Boston guy is a big deal. That's the show. So, that might be good. There's usually the Puerto Rico Pro, I think, right? Like the week after.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes sense as you get a 2-for-1 of you get to hang with the big guys in the New York Pro at a really prestigious show. And then a slightly smaller show, usually, with a smaller group of guys where you might be a little bit more competitive. So I'll talk to Jose, in the meantime, I'm going to train my ass off and then focus on, what I'm trying to do in Boston, but might be of interest to some of the New England viewers, is build a place. We've got a spot that we should have the lease signed this week. It's about 7,000 square feet in downtown Boston. And it's going to be a place for trainers to be able to train their clients. All of the gyms in Boston are corporate. Boston Sports Club, Equinox, HealthWorks. So if you're a guy like me, Jose, you, and you want to train people, there's nowhere to go. You're working for these gyms, and those gyms take 70% of what the clients pay. So if the client pays $100, you make $30 as a trainer. And there's really no place to go to do that. So I want to fix that. So we've got a spot, and it'll have multiple private rooms for a trainer to be able to reserve that private room, work with a client one-on-one for those that the clients that might want that, to be a little bit more secluded and not have eyeballs on them, with a full gym, dumbbells, squat rack, cable machine, TRX kettlebells, 3 rooms of that. Then we're going to have a big open gym. And I'm an equipment snob, traveling around like I have with Jose. You've been there to go into carbon culture. You get to try everything, and you see, like, I go to General Fitness a lot. We go to Impact Fitness. There are these gyms where you're like, that's the best leg extension. That's the best hack squat. That's the best row. Yeah. And I want to put this together for Boston. Ever since Greater Boston Fitness closed, all we have is really Bayshore going the other direction. There's nothing North Shore. There's certainly nothing right in Boston. And so the goal is to put this together and cherry pick the best pieces, first and foremost for trainers, like a guy like Jose to come down there and be able to train people all day. Someone like me, certainly all these Equinox and BSC trainers, can leave, take all of their clients with them, have their own business now with this clientele, give them a home. And then we'll also, I don't want to sell memberships because I don't want to deal with hundreds of people coming in and out, but we'll sell day passes.
Okay.
So like a guy like you wants to come in and train legs, we'll have the best leg equipment in all of Greater Boston.
Oh, wow.
You know, we'll go all out and have a belt squat, a pendulum squat, a great leg extension. You know, we're going to go all out on this.
Right on.
So if someone wants to come in and pay a day pass and hit legs there, they can do that. But we're trying to build it mainly as a home for trainers.
Right on. So people can find out on your, where were you, where are the places people can keep track of all these things?
Yeah, definitely my Instagram would be the best spot.
It's just your name, at Nate Telow?
Yep, at Nate Telow.
Telow.
NateTelow.
Yeah, I want to, the last thing I want to get into is, Jose started his YouTube channel. Jesus, I think it's been about 2 years now. Am I right?
It's been around for a while. Yeah, they initially, obviously covering all his contest prep for the Arnold, for the Olympia, traveling, all that stuff. Yeah.
So you're an integral part, a huge part of that now. You know, you do all the workout videos usually there with him, the podcast or his co-host. How did you end up being such a big part of Jose's channel?
Yeah, man, that happened a little over a year ago. COVID shut everything down, right? All of us had no place to lift. Jose and I were able to find an office building gym, like the gym that was put together within an office building, and somebody gave us the passcode. No one was going to the office building, so we had this little spot that we would go and train at. And you know, I'd become really good friends with Jose, and just, you know, without getting too personal, I could see he was having a tough time. He had his hip replacement surgery. Yeah. You know, he had retired, and it was like a different phase for him. And we were training one day, and I was just bitching about how much horrible content there is on YouTube for bodybuilding. And not you, like, you're the good guy. You and Fuad, I think, are doing a fantastic job of uplifting the sport, of bringing the right type of coverage, giving the athletes a chance, you know, where a viewer like me can watch and get to know these athletes' contest coverage. But everything outside of you guys is garbage. It's TMZ, it's tabloid, it's bringing out the worst of it. So I was just bitching to Jose one day of, you know, how sick I am of what people think bodybuilding is now, you know, because of these YouTube channels of, you know, natty or not, and what cycle is this guy on, and nobody knows what they're talking about. And so Jose, just with me complaining, was like, we should do something. And I kind of laughed, and he's like, no, I'm serious. And I'm like, dude, who am I? You know, like, you should do something. I'm going to encourage you to do it, but what am I going to do with this? I'm a nobody. I'm a local NPC competitor. And he's like, well, you and I are hanging out, talking all workout anyway. Like, you know, let's just put it on air. So we did, I think, 2 Q&As where I prepped up some questions for Jose, and we just had our normal thing and put it out there. And I didn't think anyone would watch, and we got a really good response. And Jose kind of came back to life because at that time, it connected him to bodybuilding again. You know, like, I think he was thinking, why am I going to do a YouTube channel if I'm not competing, if I'm not prepping for an Arnold and an Olympia? So we started doing this, and, you know, and as you know, man, Jose has so much that he can teach people. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a veteran. I'm still learning stuff every week from him. And so I just started kind of preparing questions, hitting him with some stuff. Obviously, Jose has a million funny stories of drunken debauchery with other pros on the road. And then we started getting into, like, hey, maybe we can get a guest. And I think Santi Aragon was our first guest. Oh, wow. And then we had Chris Aceto, and then we had Jay Cutler on. And for me, I'm like, I'm trying not to fangirl, you know, on this stuff. Like, this is nuts. Yeah. And so it kind of came about because it was COVID. Like, what else are we doing? You know, it was something for us to do, certainly for me, you know, as a nobody to do this with Jose and interview Jay Cutler and Chris Aceto and Brandon Curry and Sean Clarita. Was like, this is a dream, you know, and these guys now DM me. Like, I've gotten DMs from all of these guys. Congrats on turning pro. I was like, you know, I'm still a kid with this stuff of being such a fan of the sport and all these guys. So yeah, it came about that way. And, you know, it turned into, let's film our workouts, and just, it's Jose and I being who we are. You know, we're working out together multiple times a week anyway. I'm picking his brain. I'm asking him questions. I'm asking him about these stories of, you know, tell me about when you were overseas with Flex and Hadi. And so we're just doing it on camera.
Yeah. You know, you guys have a really good rapport because he's a jokester. He's constantly cracking jokes, and you're like the serious guy who keeps the interviews on track when they're going off into these crazy talking about vomiting or
Yeah.
5 chicks, or, it's some crazy. You keep them on track, and it's good to have that balance. Back like in the old days, they had comedy acts where one guy would be the joker and one would be the straight man. So you're good to keep him focused and keep the interviews on track. So I think
it's so funny. Like, it's exactly right. And like, it wouldn't work with just me, because you have to have, when we started doing these and I realized like, I'm going to be interviewing Jay Cutler, I took it really serious. I'm like, man, this is, I'm way out of my element. I don't want to ask Jay, like, what does it feel to be 4-time Mr. And so I started, for every guest, I watched every podcast I could find to see like what's been asked, because I don't want to repeat it. A guy like me, I watch all this stuff. I watch all your content. I watch Fuad's stuff. Yeah. I watch Dave's stuff, and unintentionally, the same stories get brought up, the same questions are asked, as is bound to happen.
Right.
And so I'm like, let me come up with some different angles. So we had Jay on, and I'm like, let's ask Jay about other businesses he owns outside of bodybuilding. Like, nobody asks him about that. Like, that's fast. Jay's worth like $60 million, like, what's the story on, where did he learn that from? A lot of it for me is, I have a lot of, I grew up with not a lot. I have a lot of entrepreneurial friends that are able to make stuff happen over and over and over again. And I love asking why and how, and where did you learn that from? So that's kind of, I do my research on the podcast, and I try and come up with questions I think aren't asked. And then, it's the more serious moment. And then Jose's like, hey, remember that time we got shit-faced? And that obviously is the highlight of the show. Yeah. It's the more entertaining part for sure.
But you couldn't, I'm not saying you couldn't just have Jose doing what he does, but I do think he wouldn't come, the questions that you come up with, I could tell. I didn't know you went that deep and you looked at all the interviews they've done, which is I commend you for that, man. I don't have the patience, but somebody needs to come up with those questions that Jose wouldn't ask, or that I wouldn't ask, or that's what makes a good interview. Because, maybe there's going to be 5 Nate Telow interviews over this next, in the course of the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping that I ask questions that nobody would have asked. I think that's the key, because there's so much content, even in our little bodybuilding world. There's so much content. Everybody's trying to interview the same guys over and over again. So it's critical that you do what you do and try to come at it from different angles. And I think you guys have an awesome channel, the Boston Mass on YouTube, guys. Check it out. Yeah, you guys do you do the interviews, you do the on-site workout stuff. It's a really good mix of content. So good job, guys.
Yeah, my whole goal is, when I started working with Jose, I realized like all the questions I was asking, what I was learning from him, it was like, let's find a way to get this out there. Like what I've been absorbing, what's allowed me to progress as much as I have as a bodybuilder over the last couple of years. We need to find some way to get that out there, whether it's like filming our workouts or these Q&As, and that's hard to do, right? Like but that was our attempt, at least, or my attempt was to say, Jose has so much knowledge. And part of it, I watched Jose's channel before I even knew him. And once I met him, I was like, oh, there's so much more to this guy. Like he would be queued up with some dumb question. Is Arimidex good or bad? And he would give a 2-minute answer, and that would be the video, And so I was like, no, there's lots of gray area in that, and that needs to be talked about. And Jose knows all of the gray area of why you would do something and not. And so it's just a longer format interview, which is now the thing, thank God, versus these little clips where we can have these debates and discussions and throw out the what if scenario stuff, because Jose has answers for all of it. It's unbelievable. The guy's lived this shit for 20 years, not only in his own career, but the thing I'll say for Jose is he doesn't want credit for anything. You won't see him taking an ounce of credit for me turning pro, and he should, but he won't. And there's dozens of people he's turned pro before me.
Oh, dude. And
nobody knows. I'm constantly singing his praises. Ron, of the coaching world out there now, where it's team this and team that, and these coaches have 200 clients underneath them, And even with that, the numbers that they have, they're not turning a lot of people pro. You know, it's cookie cutter routines. They're sending a peak week routine out 8 days before the show of here's what you're going to do. And man, I watched Jose just in the last couple of years turn multiple people pro and not even make a post about it. Like zero credit. So, but where I'm like, Jose, you deserve the credit. People should know, like people should be working with you, you know, but that's not his nature, which makes him such a great person.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could go on and on. I'm not going to about the coaching thing. And so many of them, they post constantly taking credit, and it's horrible because Jose's probably turned more people pro than almost anybody out there, almost anybody, maybe more than anybody out there. You know I've seen it all, but he never brags about it. He never makes a post. I've got this many pro cards and this, he doesn't. When you're keeping track like that, it's something.
And we all know, it's a joke, without naming any names, people have the scorecards of this season, I turned this many people pro. Yes. And oftentimes maybe you met with that person one time,
right?
And they're taking credit, or a coach jumps in and like helps somebody the last 3 weeks of their prep and they're taking credit. and so it goes the other end, right? And I understand there's a lot of money to be made by marketing that you turn a lot of people pro, because that's everybody's goal.
Sure.
And Jose's the complete opposite end of that. Nobody even knows about it. So it's guys like me that any chance I get, I'm making these posts saying, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this guy.
Yeah. I'm going to take a wild guess. This is throwing a random ass number. I bet he's turned 60 people or more pro. I bet he has.
I believe it.
Over the course of like the last 10 years or less. I bet he has, maybe more than that. I might be actually way lowballing that figure, not even realizing. I bet he doesn't keep track. I bet Jose, I bet he has no idea.
No idea.
No idea, because he doesn't care. It's not something he would even think about.
We had the talk down in South Carolina, where I just thanked him, and he's like, "Thank me for what?" Like for everything, like the knowledge that you've passed down, we work out together multiple times a week, and he's like, "You did all the work." Yeah. Literally a straight answer, like just couldn't even absorb it. Like, what are you thanking me for? You did all the work. I'm like, no. You're like, yes, I did the work, but it was your plan. There's a lot of other people working just as hard, if not harder than me, with a really shitty plan, getting nowhere. I just happen to have a really good plan to then work hard on.
Yeah. Well, man, I've been taking a lot of your time, Nate. I see you enjoying some good food now. That's a good thing. Keep getting some treats, because I'm sure it's not going to last much longer. You're probably going to start like a strict off-season plan real soon. One other thing I want to add, you're actually going to make a pretty good 212 pro. I really believe so, and I wouldn't tell you that if it wasn't true. I wouldn't even say it. If I thought you were going to suck as a pro, I would just be quiet. I wouldn't say shit. But being 5'8", people might say he's too tall. Two words for you. Two people. George Peterson, the third, 5'8", third place at the Olympia. Nathan Epler, this new kid out of Indiana, phenomenal. Also 5'8".
Both of those guys, I'm huge fans of. I didn't know, unfortunately, who Nathan Epler was until this season.
Neither did I. Trust me.
And man, that front lat spread is one of the best I've ever. Like, I didn't know who he was, and I remember telling like my girlfriend, I'm like, I want to look like that guy. And it seems like it's not far off. It's one thing to be like, I want to look like Sean Clarita. I want George Peterson's back. That's never going to happen. Right. But the Nathan Epler thing, I was like, that could be possible to be in that direction. We're the same height. I have kind of round, bubbly muscle. If I can just add more of it and create bigger, wider back, bigger legs. Huge fan of his. And then, man, George, not only am I a huge fan of his physique, I was very fortunate, thanks to Jose and our channel, to be able to go down and train with George and his coach, Justin. I was 5 weeks out from the USA's, and George was 6 weeks out from the Olympia. Wow. And I went down to Long Island, did a chest workout with him. We filmed it. It's on Jose's channel. So Jose wasn't able to go down that weekend, but it's George and I training with Justin training us. And afterwards, they took a look at me posing and gave me some critiques. And at the end, George was like, bro, you're welcome to come down and train with me anytime. He DMs me from time to time. Like, as you know him. He's one of the nicest guys in the sport.
He's a cool dude. I love George.
Yeah. So, both of those guys, man, huge fan of their physiques. But Epler is one that I've mentioned to Jose too, as I think, I don't know if this sounds too cocky, but something realistically to strive for.
Not at all. I mean, it's such a fine line because people are worried about, oh, I don't want to sound cocky, but it's not a team sport. It's just you up there. There's only one winner. If you don't believe you're good enough or you have the potential to be, why are you even doing this? If you think, well, I don't know, you can't be like that or else you're already doomed. So I personally see a lot of the same themes in your physique between you and Nathan. I see the little tiny waist, the wide clavicles, the shape. It's a classic. It's a slightly bigger physique than what you see in classic, but it's that same really pretty shape. You have that pretty shape. You're never going to be like a big Rami or anything, but you don't need to be. This is 212, and if you have that pretty shape and the bubbly round muscles and tiny joints, it's you can beat a lot of guys. And I know you're gonna. You know how to get in shape. I've seen the pictures from this universe. You are right on target. Glutes just striated and dry. And yeah, you'll take it to another level once you do a pro show. I'm sure you'll be.
That's a lot of my. I think that's kind of why I want to do one next year. Is that I had a 3-month mini off season from USA's to Universe, and I got up to about 230 pounds, but I only held it for like 2 weeks before it was time to start dieting again. At USA's, I was 204. At this show, I was 206, but a much harder. So let's say I put on 3 or 4 pounds of muscle during that 3-month off season. If I take like a 6-month off season now, to the end of the year, maybe start cleaning things up in December, diet, January, February, March. Like when's New York Pro? May?
Usually it's May.
Right. So if think of that timeline, I have some time to add that 6 pounds of muscle that I still have room for, and who knows, maybe every show I've been able to push the conditioning more, and this one being the best. So I don't doubt that we can top that a little bit, I'm a pound leaner, drier. So I'm excited, like the overalls and Jose, and then even guys like yourself, who I have a lot of respect for, who have been around this industry, who I know don't bullshit. The feedback's kind of soaking in, and the confidence level is boosting a little bit. Good. And I'm going to put in the work regardless. Like the fun for me isn't competing; it's getting to train with Jose multiple times a week and improving. And I get buried every workout training with Jose with the triple drop sets and the craziness we do on leg day. So that's the fun, and the byproduct of that is I happen to be building muscle relatively symmetrically as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see anything weak. I don't see a weak point on you, guy. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're just going to get better and better. Honestly,
that's the goal. Yeah.
So, all right. I think we've wrapped it up. Nate, congratulations. I'm very happy for you. Well earned pro card. Welcome to the IFBB Pro League. You're an interesting guy. You're well spoken. A lot of us get that reputation for being dumbasses. We're not all of us are, but you're good for the sport. So I'm glad you're a pro now, because people will take more notice of you and just give you more credibility now. And you being the way you are, it's only going to help all of us uplift the sport as the time goes by. So good to have you, dude. So that's it. Thank you so much for taking the time, Nate. Please follow him on Instagram at Nate Telow. Is that right?
Yes, you got it.
The name. And check out the website. Is it foundationfit.com?
Yep. So that's my business, where that particular business is I provide trainers to the luxury high-rise buildings of downtown Boston. So that's a totally separate thing. We're in all the buildings around here. So people who live in these buildings where there's gyms built into them. Yep. We work with management to send trainers, qualified, really good trainers with a lot of experience. The guy, Ralph, that I mentioned, who prepped me for my first show, works for me as a trainer now.
Oh, wow.
You've got a guy with 35 years of experience, basically the Charles Glass of the East Coast. He's one of the trainers that works for me. So the Foundation Fit thing is that follow my Instagram, because this gym concept, I don't want to say too much, just because we're we're signing the lease this week. We've got to cross some T's and dot some I's to finalize the name and all that. But our hope is sometime in September to get that up and running. And you'll be the first to know. We'll invite you down for a leg workout with Jose and I.
Yeah. Oh boy, that sounds fun. Seriously, yeah. Don't forget me, Nate. Come on. All right. Well, thank you, Nate, for taking the time. Congrats. Everybody, thanks for watching Ronline Report with your new IFBB Pro champion, Nate Telow. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, man.